Global nationalism. Now, if you remember, nationalism is a love and pride in one's country. And as we spoke about earlier, it can bring countries together or it can tear countries apart. And through the 1800s to the 1900s, there was a big boom in nationalism, and it had ripple effects all around the world, leading to conflicts and troubles for all throughout Europe and other parts of the world. Nationalism, like I just said, is a feeling of devotions for one's country, and it normally develops when people share a common heritage, a common language, and that's what brings them together, their common background. A major cause of nationalism across Europe was Napoleon. Remember, Napoleon wanted to conquer all of Europe. There were lots of groups of people who were fighting him, did not want to be conquered by the French. And so by working together to defeat Napoleon, they were breeding this feeling of nationalism that really never ended. That still is very much a part of Europe today. The nationalistic feeling increased with self-determination and unification. Now, self-determination is when you have control over your own destiny. You're going to make your own decisions. And these countries wanted that. They wanted to be in control of their governing decisions, their economic decisions. And many of the countries wanted to unify to become stronger, because you are stronger together than you are apart. One of the first countries to really use nationalism was Italy. And Italy, during this time, was actually 3 separate Italian states. And there were 3 Italian leaders who wanted Italy to become one unified country. And the first one was Giuseppe Mazzini, and you can see him here on this Italian stamp. He formed the Young Italian movement in the mid-1800s. And he did a lot of writing, he did a lot of speeches, even when he was thrown out of the country. And that's what exile means there. It says he was exiled. Exiled is when they throw you out of your homeland because you caused too much trouble. Even though he was thrown out of Italy, he still kept writing and kept speaking. And the copies of his speeches would make it back to Italy, and people would read them and they loved him. They wanted to have a unified Italy. He made a lot of sense to them, and he was very inspirational. Now, besides Giuseppe, you've got the Count Camillo Cavar. All right, he was the Prime Minister of Sardinia. Okay, now Sardinia, guys, is one of the little islands off the coast of Italy. And he was all about using diplomacy. Okay, so Mazzini was the writer. Cavour was the diplomat. He was the talker. He was the politician. He was all about making deals and getting people to cooperate, not through bloodshed, but through cooperation and through promises and what we call diplomacy, working with the diplomats, working with the politicians. And then the last guy was Giuseppe Garibaldi. Now, he was the fighter. He was a soldier who led the forces. He eventually would win control of all of southern Italy, and he wanted to unite the southern Italians with the northern Italians. And that was Giuseppe Garibaldi. He was the warrior, the soldier, the fighter. And you can see he's always seen on a white horse. A lot of the great soldiers are. And in this cartoon, he's on the white horse, the Italian flag behind him. And then in this sketch, he's actually carrying people from a sunken ship, showing how he's helping the people get ashore. But he was very big with the fighting. He was actually on the battlefields leading these young Italians into war. Now, in the mid-1800s, most of Italy was ruled by several different kings or the Pope. The Pope actually had his own little chunk of Italy that he controlled. And so, Victor Emmanuel, who was the king of Sardinia, wanted to unite Italy. Okay, and you can see there in this political cartoon, they're kind of making fun of him. They're showing him putting his leg into the boot of Italy. Remember, Italy looks like a boot. And there is Giuseppe Garibaldi helping to fit the boot onto him. Now, he was supposed to unite Italy and be a good leader, help everyone. Depends on what history book you read if you really think he's a good leader or not. Some say he was, some say he wasn't. Eventually, though, Italy would be united by Victor Emmanuel and be a whole united country. Now, another country that was affected by nationalism was Germany. Now, during the rise of Germany, you have the Germans and you have the Prussians. The Prussians, guys, were Eastern Europeans. They were not Russian. Prussian with a P is very different than Russian with an R. Prussians were part of Germany. They were in Central and Eastern Europe, and there were a lot of separate city-states that were all under control of several unified leaders, but were not one country of Germany yet. Now, a chancellor is going to come along named Otto von Bismarck. All right, and Otto von Bismarck totally, completely believes in German unification. He says all these German states have got to be pulled together, made into one super country, and then Germany must go out and conquer the world. Okay? He is known for his blood and iron speech. Blood and iron, Bismarck, B&B I call it, and Otto von Bismarck made this very famous speech called Blood and Iron and the Policy. Okay, he said just don't talk to him, don't do it diplomatically, no fancy government, just war. Get him through the blood, meaning the loss of troops, and get him through the iron, meaning industrialization, better weapons, better cannons, better guns, better warfare. So he was a kind of a violent guy. All right, and he was very pushy. He wanted to have his blood and iron policy work, and he pushed a lot of leaders around to make sure that it did. Bismarck led Prussia into 3 wars. All 3 of those wars he won, and that just proved that that his blood and iron worked, and as he was winning over all of these different German states, the unification of one centralized Germany was getting closer and closer. He fought the Danish, and he gained land from them. The Austro-Prussian War, he crushed Prussia in 7 weeks, and was able to gain those northern German states from Austria, unifying Prussia even more. Here we go, guys. Eventually, he's going to go into France because a lot of people had anti-Napoleonic feelings. They did not like Napoleon Bonaparte. He was able to defeat and get land back from France in the southern areas of what we call Germany today. And he was growing. His land, his country of Germany was getting bigger and bigger with working with the Prussians. In 1871, the German states finally unite under the Prussian king, William I. You can see me hear me there. I stumbled a little bit. Remember, Prussia is German. Okay, not Russian. And the Prussian king Wilhelm I, or William I, called himself Kaiser, which was German for king. Kaiser means German for king. And he was very much bullied by Otto von Bismarck. Okay, Otto von Bismarck was the strong leader, and William was kind of a whiner. And he would try to stand up to Otto, and he would lose. Otto would push him around, basically bully him, berate him, and finally Wilhelm would be crying and saying, okay, whatever you want, just stop picking on me. And so he wasn't a very strong ruler by a long shot. Now, with these examples of Italy and Germany, you can see that those are just 2 European examples of how the nationalism helped to bring together the Germans and Prussians, helped to unite the Italians. Now, in your next movie, you'll see where how nationalism affected countries not in Europe, but other places in the world.